Hello everyone, welcome to Mr. Kitty's guide on how to feral in Antorus the Burning Throne. In this guide I will go through talents, the legendaries I use, and the rotations for different situations. This is not an all-encompassing guide on everything feral, but it will be enough to get anyone interested playing a feral druid through the current raid Antorus the Burning Throne. Some of these builds you may find useful in Mythic Plus dungeons as well. First, let's get started with the talents. In the first row, we start with Predator, which is useful in high AoE situations to reset the cooldown on Tiger's Fury a little quicker. It also makes Tiger's Fury last 4 seconds longer. Blood Scent increases the critical strike chance you have on any target affected by one of your bleeds, and Lunar Inspiration, which allows you to use Moonfire in cat form. I usually run Blood Scent. It's passive, easy, and who can complain about 10% more crit. In the second row, we have Renewal, which gives you a small free heal on a moderate cooldown. Displacer Beast, which is a small teleport and very short speed increase, and then Wild Charge, which changes based on which form you are shapeshifted in. For cat form, Wild Charge places you behind your target and dazes it for 3 seconds. This row is more about personal choice. I prefer the movement increase Displacer Beast offers, as this makes it easier to get out of sticky situations. The third row covers your affinities. Affinities give you a passive benefit that can drastically change how the feral plays, and I will give you an example of this later. We have Balance Affinity, giving all of your abilities range increase and a few balance abilities. Guardian Affinity, that gives you a bit of damage resistance and a stronger bear form for off-tanking should the situation rise. And lastly, Restoration Affinity, granting you a passive 3% heal every 5 seconds for you or any party or raid member that needs it, as well as a few healing spells. I almost always run Balance because it is just hilarious being a ranged melee DPS class. Row 4 is your crowd control talents. First is Mighty Bash, a good short stun, then Mass Entanglement, which roots all enemies around you, and finally Typhoon, offering you a mass pushback. All of these have use in certain situational fights like using Typhoon in Eonar or Mass Entanglement in Heroic Agromar. But let's face it, nothing beats Typhooning your enemies over bridges in PvP. Now we get to the two meatiest talent rows for feral. Choosing the right talent in these two rows and synergizing them well with what gear you have can make or break your damage output in certain fights. Starting with the fifth row, we have Soul of the Forest, which refunds a small amount of energy per combo point spent and increases the damage of all finishing moves by 5%. This is kind of a weak talent on its own, but can be quite powerful if you have the ring that provides it. Next is Incarn. This replaces Berserk, makes your Shred and Rake do damage as if you were stealthed, and reduces the energy cost of everything. This is really the strongest talent in the row if your mastery is low. If your mastery is high, you will have a case to take Jagged Wounds. All this does is deal out your bleed damage faster. The sixth row has two very powerful talents to choose from, and one almost never used talent ever, which is Sabretooth. It resets the duration of Rip every time you use Ferocious Bite and increases Ferocious Bite's damage by 20%. This sounds great and good, but it just doesn't work well for maximizing your damage. Brutal Slash is a very powerful and cheap AoE ability. It has 3 charges, a 10-second recharge that gets shorter with more haste. Lastly is Savage Roar, which gives you a 15% damage increase across the board, and lasts longer depending on how many combo points you have when you use it. The last row of talents are more about smoothing out your rotation and energy conservation versus snapshotting your bleeds. We will cover what snapshotting is in a moment. Moment of Clarity gives your Omen of Clarity double the chance to proc and allows it to stack 2 times. It also increases the damage of your next Shred, Thrash, Swipe, or Brutal Slash, whichever you have due to talents, by 20% and gives you 30 more energy. Blood Talons makes it so anytime you cast Regrowth or Entangling Roots, you will have a buff to make the next 2 melee abilities do 20% more damage. And Loon's Guidance gives you 5 combo points right away, and 1 combo point every second for the next 5 seconds. It also has a 30-second cooldown. I personally always use Moment of Clarity. It just smooths out the rotation overall. Blood Talents can be synergized with a high mastery build for more powerful bleeds, but even then it just feels clunky and wrong any time I've experimented with it. Now this brings me to snapshotting. Snapshotting is basically buffing your next bleeds with using a combination of Blood Talons, Savage Roar, Tiger's Fury, and Berserk or Incarn. If you apply a bleed like Rip or Rake while all of these abilities are active, it will do a pretty good amount of damage for its full duration. However, thinking about snapshotting bleeds and lining everything up can be more difficult than the payoff, since you will have to deal with boss mechanics as well. It's best not to overload yourself with worrying about snapshotting when you can make a build that does as much damage with way less effort. Okay, let's get going on the primary builds I like to use. First, we will start with the Burst AoE build. This build is more practical for fights that you need to focus a good deal of single target damage and kill some smaller adds quickly. This is the build I generally run all the time while world questing or running keys, things like that. This build is great for the Portal Keeper boss, as you can deal out a lot of burst damage to the boss while saving brutal slash charges for the adds. Starting off with the talent choices, I run with Incarn and Brutal Slash. As for gear choices, try to focus less on mastery and more everything else. Starting out, you'll want to get your bleeds out on the primary target, like Rake and Rip. Activate Incarn and Tiger's Fury to start shredding the absolute garbage out of your primary target. To maximize damage, you will want to keep at least a single Brutal Slash on charge as often as practical. So if you see that you have 3 charges, you should probably spend one if no adds are due in the next 3 or 4 seconds. When the adds pop out, it's as simple as getting a Thrash out and then spamming Brutal Slash. Dump your combo points as soon as they cap with Ferocious Bite or Refreshing Rip. Always use Ashmane's Frenzy on cooldown and maybe buff it with any unused trinkets you may have. That's the basic rotation for this build. The next build is purely single target and not much else. It does absolutely horribly on anything other than a one target fight. The talent choices are Incarn and Savage Roar. This will also be a build to avoid mastery on. Start off with applying Rake, Ashmane's Frenzy, and get to 5 combo points for your Savage Roar or Rip, and another 5 combo points to do whichever you didn't apply. Now pop Incarn, then Tiger's Fury, and let the shredding and ferocious bites rain down on your target for the next 30 seconds. Don't worry if Rip falls off during this duration, as shreds and ferocious bites are going to be dealing out far more damage. However, you will want to take advantage of the added damage bonus to Rake, so keep that up during your Incarn burst phase. After the burst phase, just keep your Savage Roar up as often as you can and refresh Rip when it comes close to falling off. Maintain Rake and dump combo points into Ferocious Bite if Rip and Savage Roar are not close to falling off. So this is a bursty build, but it still does good sustained damage between burst phases. The last build I will cover here is the Sustained AoE build. This build is more for dealing out heavy damage to multiple targets that tend to live longer than 10 to 15 seconds. Think Antorus High Command as an example. The adds live long enough for all your bleeds to be pretty useful. For talents, this build uses Jagged Wounds and Brutal Slash, therefore try to get high mastery for effective bleeds. This rotation is quite simple, but requires a lot of movement and engagement with multiple targets. The basic premise here is to apply your Rake and Rip to the primary target. When the adds come out, use Thrash, switch to the next target, Rake and Rip it, then on to the next and do it again. You'll be going around all targets, maintaining your bleeds, and that's basically it. Very simple and down to the point. You'll definitely want to use Brutal Slash as often as possible, Thrash whenever a moment of clarity procs, and Shred should only ever be used as a filler if no adds are out. Chances are you won't use Ferocious Bite too often unless you have the 4-piece set bonus and you need to dump a charge. Now I will show you the reason why Balance Affinity coupled with the legendary chest piece is just utterly insane and freaking awesome for Feral Druids. The legendary chest for Druids increases the effects of your affinities by 75%, and it has some pretty decent stats on it as well. Now take a look at this brief demonstration of how far away I can be from the target with the chest equipped versus unequipped. Also, you'll get a laugh at how I can basically plant myself in the middle of all these target dummies and hit them with Thrash and Brutal Slash. Well, that's it, folks. Those are the 3 builds that get me through Antorus, the Emerald Trial in the Tomb of the Nighthold. If you have any suggestions for more videos regarding World of Warcraft, leave a comment below. Mr. Kitty out!